Well, folks, today I wanted to give you guys a little tutorial on the fundamentals of indie music. Now, this is an interesting topic because, well, it's becoming sort of a retro legacy idea, indie music. I'm talking that traditional indie music with like the acoustic guitar. Because, music these days is it's not very guitar driven anymore, It is what it is. People are like, people don't play real instruments anymore. Get over it, old man. Things change, right? Yeah. Okay, so what's the deal with indie music? Because I know you have questions. I'm sure you've seen it on TV and you're wondering, what the hell is going on? What is that? What am I seeing right now? Well, let me explain. See, I wrote this out because I want to make sure this is detailed and it gives a good explanation of indie music because it can seem confusing when you watch it on TV. So, indie music, right? Now, see, it all dates back to roughly around the 1980s. And you're probably wondering, Tony, what's so fucking special about the 1980s? Why don't you just shut up and delete your YouTube channel? That's what you're probably thinking. Well, you see, in the 1980s, there was this sort of very flashy, glammy music, very technical with super fast, really speedy technical guitar solos and really intricate drum and guitar parts and crazy vocals with swaying up and down 8-octave registers, and it was very glammy, show-offy kind of music, right? Now, of course, human psychology dictates. Webster's dictionary actually has this info. Do people still do that joke? How does that joke go? Where they make fun of like the nerdy guy who's like does a speech during a wedding, and then like they start the speech. They always go, Webster's dictionary defines love as, do people still do that joke? Anyways, okay. So the 1980s were super flashy. Now, what does that dictate? Well, that dictates that psychologically speaking, there's going to be a backlash to that. Because there's always a backlash to everything, right? So what was the backlash? The Seattle scene, right? The Seattle scene killed 80s glam, right? Now, if you're wondering, what the hell is the Seattle scene, Tony? Right? Well, I wrote it all down here, so let me read it so I know what the hell it is, God damn it. See? The Seattle scene. See, it was called grunge, And, well, no one really called it grunge, unless you were an asshole. Then you called it grunge, Which is kind of weird because Kurt Cobain, who was sort of like the poster child of that whole grunge scene, he actually embraced the word grunge. He would actually mention it all the time. Which is kind of ironic because he really didn't embrace a lot of things. So you're thinking, what's the problem, Tony, right? Everything seems pretty on point here. There was this super glammy technical thing going on in the 80s. And then grunge music came along and put an end to it. Seems pretty logical, right? So what's the big mystery, Tony? Well, you see, that wasn't enough. Because yes, the Seattle scene was less glammy and, it wasn't about like hot chicks and fast cars. It was like a little bit more, watered. It was a little more tame. It was about like the music, But it still had signs of some flashiness. There were still some guitar solos, right? So people saw that and are like, what the fuck is that? They're still slightly showing off. And nobody wants a slight show. People definitely don't like a super show off, but they don't even like a slight show off. So they were thinking, how can we create a genre of music where where we practice. We practice for years, we learn about music, but then we play our instruments in a way where it looks like we just started playing 2 weeks ago. And that's how indie music got invented. That's the whole gimmick. The whole gimmick is learning how to play music, practicing guitar, but then when you actually play the songs, just make it look like you just started playing 2 weeks ago. And that's how you get indie music. It's the best thing. And you're probably wondering, Tony, I don't understand what you're talking about. You've seen it. You've seen the videos of indie songs. I'll start off with the basics of an indie band, the fundamentals. And the first thing is the Indie Strum. Now, when I said Indie Strum, I accidentally whistled a bit there, and there's nothing I can do about it. But let me explain the Indie Strum to you. Okay, so I have a guitar with me here. Now I'm going to explain. Now, keep in mind, it's a tricky technique. I haven't mastered it yet, but I'm going to attempt to show you the Indie Strum. Right. Okay, so we got a guitar here. Okay, so the Indie Strum is sort of like, the idea is that, see, when you play guitar, your wrist naturally does a lot of interesting things, You play guitar and your wrist kind of moves around and does a lot of interesting things, You play around and you think, oh yeah, there's a lot of things going on. But you don't want to do that in indie music. The indie music, you want to... Have you ever seen somebody when they first start playing guitar and they look really awkward because their hand is really stiff and like they're trying to learn how to strum? They're like, how do you strum, Tony? Like, let's say you're strumming some general open chords like... Right? And they're like, whoa, so how are you strumming? It kind of looks like that. So it looks like you're trying to strum, but you can't really, and it looks awkward. That's the trick to playing in an indie band. So you don't want your wrist to be too busy, and you want to look like you're just learning how to play. But you remember, you've been playing for like 15 years, but don't let on. So hold the guitar in a really stiff, awkward way and sort of play like this. Do you see what I mean? That's indie. And it's a tricky technique, but it has that indie vibe. So the trick is to just sort of like... and I wrote down some tips here, I think, as far as getting that technique. Let's see what I wrote down here. Okay, so it says here, now if you can't quite get that strumming technique, I would suggest severely injuring your hand so you have at least 80% less mobility. Because remember, indie music, mobility is sort of frowned upon. It looks too show-offy. That's a good tip. Yeah, so severely injure your right hand, the one that you strum with. That's not bad. I'm glad I wrote that down. Now, of course, just as important as the indie strum is the vocals, the indie vocals. This is key. Now remember, the key is to show zero enthusiasm. Now, this might be hard to get right away. Now, I wrote down another helpful hint. If you can't get that sort of indie singing going, I wrote down, I would suggest, if you can't get that indie sound going with zero enthusiasm, I would suggest perhaps imagining someone has a gun to your head and you're being forced to perform these songs against your will. Now that's going to really create that really sort of indie vibe. Because if you're going to do an indie band, you got to get all the nuances down. You know what I mean? That's a good tip. Now also, for sure, never try to raise or lower your voice in any significant way. Okay, because monotone is key. Once again, the raising and the swaying of the voice, that's show-offy. You definitely don't want to do that. You'll be the asshole of the indie community if you try to, like, pull a Jeff Buckley and fucking sway your voice up and down. Don't do that. These are good tips. I hope this is sort of giving you an idea of what indie music's all about. What else do I have here? Okay, another good tip is if you're playing a live show, you've just finished playing your indie song. After the song is over, try not to get too excited about acknowledging the crowd, even if it's a big crowd. You know, don't be like, oh wow, hey everybody, thanks for coming out. What a huge, beautiful audience. Don't do that shit. That's so not indie. Basically, after the song is over, kind of blankly look out towards the audience with a blank stare and just be like, oh, you're all here. And then that's it. That's it. You just say, oh, you're all here. And then that's it. That's as much as you want to acknowledge the crowd. Otherwise, you're being a dick. You're being a show-offy dick. Right? Because remember, it's basically you have to do the opposite of like the 80s version. Like, are we ready to rock and roll? Like, you can't be a dick like that. You can't be that guy. So it's got to be just like you look at the crowd in a blank stare and you go, oh, you're all here. And that's it. That's basically indie fundamentals. Now, I got some more because, you know, it's intricate. Right. Okay, now, so you've got yourself figured out. Now you're thinking, I can start an indie band. I have everything I need. But it's not just about you, you asshole. It's about your band, too. The band is very important. Now, I would suggest, I wrote down here, I would suggest to have a multi-instrumentalist in your band. It's very important for the indie vibe. A multi-instrumentalist. But there's a bit of a trick to this. You can't just go out and hire a multi-instrumentalist and think you're going to be an indie band now. It doesn't work that way. There's a very subtle nuance to this multi-instrumentalist. First of all, most of the time he's just standing on stage looking sad and confused. He's actually not playing anything. He just looks awkward. Sometimes he has his head down. Sometimes he's looking up towards the sky. And he's wondering, what am I even doing on stage? But he's there because you hired him as part of the band. That's the whole indie vibe. Now you're wondering, so Tony, if this multi-instrumentalist is just sitting there not doing nothing, why am I paying him when I can get all the money myself? Well, then you're not an indie band. And here's the gimmick. This multi-instrumentalist, he's usually not doing anything. But once in a while, he'll add a little thing to the song. Like, what does he normally do? What does he normally do? Oh yeah. Sometimes, like, near about the middle of the song, they'll pick up like a banjo or something. Or like aggressively strum like a G chord. Or perhaps they'll pick up a harmonica. You know, and make some screeching sounds for about like a couple of bars, and then that's it. That's what's cool about that multi-instrumentalist. They'll usually just pick a random little moment to do something, and for the rest of their songs, they're just twiddling their thumbs. But they give that indie vibe on stage. So the multi-instrumentalist is really important to fulfilling that indie vibe. But remember, they have to look like they're not really a part of the band, like they just happen to be on stage for no apparent reason. And then the shock value of when they actually play that harmonic or banjo, people are like, holy shit, this is real indie. Real indie. This is like legitimate indie. They'll like it, right? So you have you're looking blankly into the audience. Sometimes you acknowledge them slightly. You're singing like someone has a gun to your head. You don't really want to sing, but you're being forced to sing. You're keeping your voice completely monotone. You're getting the vibe. You got the multi-instrumentalist on stage doing nothing. So you're thinking, what's left? Well, the drummer is very important too. Now, typically speaking, what an indie band will do is before the show, they'll just randomly select someone from the crowd to be the drummer. And that's, which is ironic because that's usually the best part of the indie band, right? Because this poor fella, he's so excited. They just randomly picked him up from the crowd. And he's playing these songs like nobody's business. You know, he's like doing John Bonham fills and solos. And the band's looking at him the whole time thinking, what the fuck are you doing? You're ruining our whole thing. But he's so fucking excited. He got asked to join a band like 2 minutes before the show. Doesn't even know the songs. Doesn't matter. That's why like those indie bands have that cool like sort of like off time thing that they do. Yeah, their drummers are randomly picked from the audience, typically speaking. Yeah, let me see what else I wrote down here. Now, you're probably wondering, why would they hand select the drummer out of the audience a couple of minutes before the show? Well, here's, psychologically speaking, this is how you seal the deal. You see, it's hard to pretend. Like, you know, I told you, you should just imagine that someone's holding a gun to your head while you're singing. That way you really lack any sort of enthusiasm. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, because you have to keep holding that mental image in your head. But when you hand select the drummer from the audience, and he's sitting there trying to play these fancy John Bonham fills and solos, it genuinely pisses you off and makes you sad, because you know he's ruining your indie vibe. And then that's it, now you're fully indie, because you're genuinely sad and upset now. So you don't even have to pretend like someone's holding a gun to your head to perform the song. Now you're just genuinely upset. And then that's the whole indie band. That's what seals the deal. So you always have to have that random drummer from the audience to get you in that actual legitimate indie mood. And that's it. Because that drummer is going to make you feel slightly embarrassed, like he's ruining the whole image of the band. And that's what gets you in that sort of like subconscious indie mind, that indie, because you're always thinking about like how legitimate of an indie band are you. Yeah, you know, big fancy bands like use a huge tour bus, you know, but we ride our bicycles to the show and we put our amps tied up to our bicycles. That's indie. And that's it. That's all you really need. That's basically the fundamentals of starting an indie band. Now, it might be confusing. You might have to rewatch it a couple of more times. I might have to also. But that's it. I think that's all I wrote down. I also wrote, oh yeah, now remember, practice hard. Just don't make it too apparent that you've been practicing. That's very show-offy. That's obvious. And then the last thing I wrote is, now go out there and conquer the world as a sad and unenthusiastic indie band. That's it. So that was my indie tutorial, and that's it. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care. Bye.